So I've got a stack of books on my shelf that I'm pretty sure I'm going to love, and I am so keen to share them with you. First up is Stay With Me by Ayobami Adebayo. This book was shortlisted for the Women's Prize in 2018, I think. It's about a young woman called Yejide, and it's basically the story of her relationship with her husband, who was facing pressure from his family to take on a second wife when they are struggling to conceive a child together. I think I'm going to love this book for many reasons. I love books that examine gender roles and I guess the nexus between a woman's fertility and her worth as a person. It's also set in 1980s Nigeria, which is a time period and a cultural setting that I don't really know much about and that I'd really love to read more about. Plus, literally everyone I've seen review this book has been raving about it, so I am so excited to read this. Next on this list is The Joy of Tax by Richard Murphy, which is all about how a fair tax system can create a better world, and I am so here for that. Distributive justice and the fair allocation of resources is something that I am incredibly passionate about, and it makes me endlessly furious that there are so many individuals and corporations that are not currently paying their fair share, and we need tax reform. So it says on the blurb that Richard Murphy is going to discuss basically what tax is for and how it can create the society that we all aspire to. I think looking at tax is a really important part of the conversations we have about economic justice, and I reckon, or I hope at least, that this will be a handy little tool in my leftist arsenal for when I'm having those conversations with people. Thirdly, we have BookTube darling and most recent Booker Prize winner Girl, Woman, Other by Bernardine Evaristo. This is a story of 12 people living in Britain and the various trials and tribulations of their lives. I've also heard that most of the characters in this book are Black and are women, which is always very exciting. I just love stories that follow multiple characters and how their lives intertwine and connect to each other. And frankly, I've just been completely swept up in the hype for this book, and I am just so curious what it is about it that people cannot stop raving about, basically, especially now that it's shortlisted for the Women's Prize. I also think in general, the Women's Prize shortlist this year looks absolutely amazing. Like Weather and Hamnet, they are both incredibly high up on my priorities for this year. I really want to get to them. They sound so interesting. Their premises just sound so intriguing. Fourth on this list is Growing Up Aboriginal in Australia, edited by Anita Heiss. Now, this is a collection of stories and interviews and essays from various authors, public figures and creators who are all Indigenous Australians. And I think it also features a number of pieces from new, emerging, up-and-coming creators and writers as well, which is really exciting. So there are lots of really cool people in here. Deborah Cheetham, the renowned soprano. I actually just recently watched Umarella, A War Requiem for Peace on YouTube from the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra recording. She was absolutely revelatory in that. It was stunning. Deborah Cheetham is just a genius. Oh my god, Miranda Chapsel's in here. Oh, I love her. Oh, sick. Marley Silver's in here. Marley Silver hosts one of my favorite podcasts. It's called Titters for Titters. It's a podcast all about excellent Indigenous women, and she interviews a new guest every week, and they just talk about what they've done and how they got there and the stories from their lives and what it means to be Aboriginal and their sort of experiences. Yeah, that's a really great podcast. I'd recommend it to anyone who loves a good podcast. I'll try and link all of these things in the description because they're just brilliant. I think it's so important to support and celebrate Indigenous literature, and especially as a settler, as an immigrant, to educate yourself basically on the experiences and voices of First Nations people, especially people whose lands that you live on. I'm also really excited to read about what I'm sure will be an extremely diverse range of experiences of Aboriginality in Australia. Of course, that identity and that experience is not the same for everyone, and I think it's important to acknowledge and honor those diverse experiences in our conversations. Then I have Alias Grace by Margaret Atwood. This book is about a housemaid, I think, who has been convicted of murdering the people that she works for, but she cannot remember committing those crimes. I believe this book follows her and a psychiatrist who is volunteered to basically try and unlock her memories to see if she can start to remember her past. Safe to say, this premise sounds absolutely chilling, and I have full faith in Margaret Atwood to deliver an extremely gripping and just really thrilling read. I have read two other books by Margaret Atwood. Obviously, I read The Handmaid's Tale for school in year 12 and I adored it. And then more recently, at the end of last year, I read Hagseed, which I also absolutely loved. I just think Margaret Atwood's writing is just searing and impactful and has always left a lasting impression on me. So I'm very, very excited to read this. The next book is also by an author I have read before, and that is A Thousand Splendid Suns by Khaled Hosseini. I read The Carrot Runner years ago, I think the end of 2015, end of 2014 maybe, and I absolutely loved it. I think for me it was one of the first sort of grown-up books I'd read, and it had a huge emotional impact on me. I was so compelled by it and so moved by it, I was bawling my eyes out at the end. So this book is all about Mariam, a young girl who was sent to Kabul to get married, and then years later when the Taliban take over and they set up this really brutal regime, it's about her trying to navigate that. So there are lots of reasons I'm excited about this book. I just love books about women and their strength and their resilience and their resourcefulness. I also really love books that explore the friendships and bonds between women. Basically, I have very high hopes and expectations of this book, and I am aching to get to it very soon. Next, we have Fire Country by Victor Stephenson. It is all about how traditional Indigenous burning practices can save Australia. And of course, it is extremely relevant now after the horrific bushfires we've seen. So the author of this book, Victor Stephenson, learnt about traditional burning practices when he was being mentored by two elders who taught him about caring for country through the practice of cultural burning. So especially after reading Dark Emu by Bruce Pascoe, I have been really itching to learn more about traditional Indigenous knowledge systems, especially relating to the environment. As we all know, climate and ecological justice cannot be achieved without proper justice and recognized sovereignty and self-determination of First Nations people, and acknowledging the wealth of knowledge and wisdom that First Nations people hold about caring for the environment is a really crucial step to that. Also, you can probably tell that this is a library book. Just wanted to shout out my local library who are doing home deliveries during the time of physical distancing. And I think that's a really lovely service. It has absolutely brightened my days, and I am so thankful that they are doing that. I really need to bake the library staff and volunteers some brownies after this just to say thank you, because I cannot explain how much it has brightened my days to receive library books in the mail. God, I miss libraries. The next book I wanted to talk about is Sand Talk by Tyson Yunkaporta. Now, along the same vein, this book is also about Indigenous knowledge systems in general and how they can save the world and provide a new template for living and understanding the world around us. I had the immense pleasure of hearing Tyson Yunkaporta speak at a panel hosted by the Ngara Institute, which is a think tank that focuses on social justice issues. I will link their website in the description because they are doing lots of really awesome work. During this panel, the author covered a whole host of topics, including the climate crisis and neoliberalism and what decolonization could actually look like. But the thing that really stuck out most to me and really impacted me was when he showed the audience a wood carving that he'd made that basically explained through the artwork and the symbolism on the wood carving how Indigenous knowledge systems can be utilized in mainstream education. It was absolutely beautiful and completely shifted my perspective on Western paradigms of learning and how much we can learn from incorporating different cultural perspectives. So from that experience, I am sure I will adore reading anything that came out of Tyson Yunkaporta's mind, so I am so incredibly excited for Sand Talk. The penultimate book on this list is Their Brilliant Careers by Ryan O'Neill. If you were here from the very humble beginnings of this channel, you might remember that I actually did a whole video on another one of Ryan O'Neill's books, The Weight of a Human Heart, which is a short story collection. I'll link to that video as well if you're interested. I just love the way Ryan O'Neill crafts his stories and characters. They're just so intricate and playful, especially when it comes to experimenting and playing with form and structure and language conventions. So this is a novel that was published in 2016 and is a collection of 16 fictional biographies of Australian writers that Ryan O'Neill has invented. I believe he will link those stories together to sort of paint this tapestry of life as a writer. It sounds very tongue-in-cheek, very weird and experimental, and I am so excited for that. Finally, I have Wondersmith, The Calling of Morrigan Crow by Jessica Townsend. This is the second book in the extremely popular Nevermore series. So this series, if you don't already know, is about a young girl called Morrigan Crow who is cursed at birth to die on her 13th birthday. But on the evening of her 13th birthday, she is whisked away by the very illustrious and very funny Jupiter North, who takes her to the magical city of Nevermore, where she is enlisted to take part in a series of very grueling trials that, if she passes, will afford her entry into the very prestigious Wondrous Society, which is a very elite school for talented individuals who the admissions board think are destined for great things. I absolutely adored the first book in the series, which I read last year. I loved the magical world it produced. It was so rich and vibrant, and the characters were all done so well. I also loved the mystery it set up and the questions it left us with for the rest of the series. It really, really brought me back to my childhood when I was reading a lot of children's fantasy. It gave me lots of Harry Potter vibes while still being completely unique and interesting. I am so excited to pick this up. So those are just some books I am pretty certain I'm going to love. Thank you so much for watching if you made it this far. Do let me know in the comments if you've read any of these books, if you want to read any of these books. Did you love them? Did you hate them? I would love to know. Let's keep chatting down below. But right, I hope you're safe and well, and I am looking forward to seeing you very soon.